YouTube panel community, John Entwistle fans, random people on the internet, my name is Giggens, and we're here today to talk about John Entwistle's 1971 solo debut, Smash Your Head Against the Wall. Love the title. In America, this was released on Decca Records. In England, it was released on Track Records. By 1971, The Who had become a humongous touring act. They had established themselves as an album-oriented band, having come across a couple of hard eras for them already in their short lifetime by this point, especially 1968 being one of their least output type years, then having gigantic success with Tommy, a humongous success with Live at Leeds. They were pretty much on top of the rock world at this point, especially as a live group. And so the next project after Tommy was going to be this thing called Lifehouse, which you've probably heard all about it. Basically, it was this far-out concept that Pete had a super hard time explaining to the guys in the band. It was going to be this, they're going to do gigs with an audience, and the audience is going to have a certain feedback for a certain type of audience, is going to get a certain type of song. They're going to have a commotion, like a dialogue, a back and forth. The song is going to relate to the people relate to the music. It was this big, expansive idea that no one understood. It was basically the internet, and Pete had a really hard time getting that across. Needless to say, he did a bunch of shows at this Young Vic theater in England, and nothing really clicked. The audience wasn't getting it. There was times where it just wasn't gelling with the guys in the band, and they actually had talks at one point. They were kind of considering almost breaking up. They were like, if nothing happened earlier in their career, this would be the time that we would do it. So they weren't feeling super good about the direction things were going. They had been recording for a long time. The album wasn't really feeling like an album, and eventually it was scrapped, and they just took the best bits from it and put out Who's Next, which was one of the biggest and best rock albums of all time. So something good happened from it. So around this time, because of the inactivity of putting out an album, because you gotta remember, by the time this came out on May 14th, 1971, their last studio album was Tommy. 2 years before that, so that's a long time. And in that time, John was developing as a songwriter. He had at least one song on each album since a quick one, and his songs were growing, and he was getting better at it, and he just wanted to put more songs out there. But he felt like he was the George Harrison of the group, where there's really only room for one sect of songwriter, and that's it. There's just not room for two songwriters in the band, and he understood that. So instead of leaving The Who, he wanted to just put out his own solo album, and that's what he did. And this is a really, really good album. It's been a long time since I heard it, so it was fun to jump back into it and really try to, take it apart and listen to it. The story behind the album cover is great. Apparently he wanted to have like this death mask on his face and then a picture of an x-ray on top of it of a chest. So he went to his doctor and he told the doctor, look, I want a picture of my own chest, my own rib cage. I'm gonna, put this green tint over it with a wet death mask and have this creepy cover. And his doctor was like, I'll do you one better. I've got a rib cage of a heart disease patient. And John was like, yeah, that's cool. Because John's humor was like kind of morbid, macabre, dark, black humor. And so he was hoping the guy had already passed away because he didn't want this guy's chest on his album cover. And the inside cover is actually the spine of a pregnant woman. So again, more humor from him. But yeah, so most of the themes on this album are about life and death because he wrote about that a lot. One of his most famous songs is Heaven and Hell, and it's on this album too. It's a different version, but it's on this album. This album didn't chart in the UK, unfortunately, but it did chart in the US. It peaked at number 126 on the Billboard charts. It was released 5 months after the UK version, so it came out earlier in the UK than in America, so they got it, I guess, in the fall. This album is also great because his songwriting is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of those things. It's kind of like the All Things Must Pass of The Who, because you got an album from a guy in the band who, has one or two great songs in an album, but being able to pull it off by yourself, he really makes it work. He's got the frontman aesthetic. He's got the songwriting chops. He's got a tight group of players with him here. So it works. He really did a great job. This album does have a couple different versions as far as the vinyl goes, and with the CD versions as well. It's kind of a mess. If anyone knows about John Entwistle, it was that he was never happy or satisfied with what he recorded. And even when they put out the Who CDs in the 90s, he was re-recording his bass parts for those too. So You never know. But apparently the German and UK versions are different from this American version. Different mixes. Apparently the European one has a, quote, grittier and heavier feel to it. I love the sound of this one. I think it's great. So I haven't heard the other ones. I'm excited to check them out and try to track some of those down at some point. But even up to putting out the CDs of this thing, he was fiddling with different mixes and his bass playing. And some of the CD versions have like different takes from the European version and the American version combined. Apparently it's a nightmare to try to figure out, but beyond that, this is a US copy, and this is what I'm going off of today. So, the album opens with a song called My Size, which should have been a gigantic single. I think it's one of the best, like, Who-ish rockers in the canon out there, especially for John Entwistle solo stuff. It's an unbelievable song. It sounds like a Black Sabbath song or something that Mountain would have put out. Real big, heavy rock radio riff, really, really upfront, total frontman vocals from John Entwistle. It's almost like he was never in a band with with Roger Daltrey. He knows how to handle that field. He steps right in and he's in total control, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. You're in this world of his group that he put together for this solo album. It's got that total appeal that should be on the radio. It sounds like a rock staple classic. Apparently I read a quote with him where he said that people thought it was the new Who single when it was out. It sounds like it could have been a Who song. The solo that rips over this killer groove is absolutely fantastic. It really should have been a bigger single than it was. It's a shame that didn't chart at all. It's really well mixed, and that's what I noticed about a lot of this album. The whole album is really well mixed. It's produced so tight and lovingly, and John produced it. Pick Me Up, Big Chicken. So there's more talk on this song about life and death, and being up against the wall. Where he sings, "All I want to do is sleep," it has this like real, like evil sounding growl to it. Really reminds me of Blood, Sweat, and Tears with all the horns and the arrangements on the brass on this song. Again, a great solo going over the groove, and this song really has like that rock and roll force to be reckoned with kind of feel. What Are We Doing Here is a really calm vocal from John. I was surprised to hear his voice like this. It was really, really like beautiful. It was like tender and really sweet. So mostly acoustic songs, some really nice tight drums on this thing. And I love the chorus. It almost sounds like an Eagles song, which is interesting because he did work with Joe Walsh much later on in his career on the Too Late the Hero album. So there's that. I'm crinkling paper on my leg. What Kind of People Are They is the next track on this thing. Real heavy on the brass. Again, I like the vocal melody. Not too much to say about that one. And then Heaven on Hell. This is known as like the druggy version. I even call it like a slightly sludgy, stoned version. The Who had been playing Heaven and Hell as early as 1968, and of course it was on their during their Live at Leeds era. That's like the most popular version of it. They did record a studio version of it, which was the B-side of Summertime Blues, which came out in 1970, in July of 1970. And that version, even that version, is a little more chill than the live one. If you took like the speed of these songs, the fastest is the live version. Then you get the Who's version on the studio, and then you get the slower version on this one. But I think it really works well. I like this version of it. I like the horns on it. I like the slow groove to it. It's a whole different approach, and I kind of like that vibe that it gives off. His bass playing is unbelievable. I mean, that goes without saying. It's Yachts. He basically invented playing the bass. Side 2 opens with a song called Ted End, and it's about this guy named Ted who dies, and it's basically like his version of Eleanor Rigby. This funeral where no one was there. No one came is one of the words in one of the lines in the song. I really like the somber but really like yearning horn section on this song. And the songwriting for this one, for me, sounds like if the Kinks and 1968 Pink Floyd got together and wanted to put a song together. It's got that like English flavor to it. That like Baroque-esque influence flavor, which I really enjoy. Cool song. Your Mind. This song is really cool because it's got like these like great shimmery, dancey pianos, absolutely fantastic lead vocal, and great harmonies. Real bouncing bass throughout this thing, and a really soulful vibe. Lots of like group vocals on that, and the whole like "Get Behind Me, Satan" line bit where it gets like really dark and classic, totally classic John Entwistle throughout there. There's a whole like big booming, room shaking, like cataclysmic, thunderous section that happens a couple times throughout this song, and it really like makes your walls shake. If you've got to turn it up a little bit, it totally like sounds like a herd of elephants coming through your room. And then it jumps back into the horn section again for the, from the rest of the song. But it also like segues into the next song, which is number 29, External Youth, which does have Keith Moon on it playing different kinds of percussion. So the two songs kind of play as like one long song. There's like motifs and melodies that get repeated throughout this number 29 track. So it's mostly like a jam that comes off of Your Mind. And the last song on this thing, I Believe in Everything, is great because he had a lot of people who thought he was like really into this like dark occult devil kind of stuff, and he wasn't really into it. Just he was interested in the idea of this stuff, and so he kind of played with those themes with his music because it was a fun thing to play with. He didn't like believe in the devil or something, and so he wrote this whole song about things he believes in, all this dark stuff. And at the very end, as a joke, just to throw everybody off, sings Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and I think that's great. That's totally his humor. Really enjoyed that. One thing I forgot to mention about My Size is that apparently when he was making this album, somebody wanted him to re-record Boris the Spider and put it on here. But instead of doing that, he did this version, which apparently has elements of Boris the Spider in it, thematically, and I guess some parts musically. So I really enjoyed this album. I think it was a lot of fun. It's been a long time since I heard it. And his solo albums in the early 70s I think are pretty good. I even like bits of Mad Dog. A lot of people don't like that album, but I think it's pretty cool. So, here's the inside. Let me show you it's a gatefold, but you got this big picture of a spine. Check that out. Kind of gross. And there's your song titles there. And let's open this thing up so you can see the cool label. I'm a big fan of the Decca label myself. It's one of my favorites. So there we go. Smash your head against the wall, John Entwistle. Unfortunately this album, like most of the Who's solo stuff, beyond Pete Townsend, I guess Pete did pretty well solo-wise, and Roger did too, I suppose. This is kind of like forgotten. A lot of John's solo work, unless you were there at the time, seems to have been kind of forgotten. So there's been several CD reissues. Sundays put one out at one point. I think there was a 2005 to 1997 issue of this album with bonus tracks, including a version of Cinnamon Girl by Neil Young. You should check out. It's really cool. So yeah, I really dig this album. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and it's sorely overlooked in the Who's canon, and I guess probably in rock and roll in general. I'd probably give this thing like a solid 7, maybe an 8. I wish it was a little bit longer, and I wish there was a little bit of a deviation between Your Mind and number 29. Maybe like one more song on the album, or maybe a little bit of a difference in the jamming on number 29. Maybe a little bit of something different to shake it up there, but overall, I really can't complain. I thoroughly enjoyed this thing. I love the group harmonies. I love the focused approach to all the songwriting. The chemistry between all the players is very tight. It almost sounds like they've been just doing this for years. The way they gel together is absolutely fantastic. There really isn't a weak link here. The guitar playing is sharp. Obviously, his bass playing is fantastic, and it's always fantastic. There's nothing wrong there. So that's all I gotta say about that one. Highly advise you to pick this up if you haven't heard it. Smash your head against the wall. My name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with John Entwistle. Smash your head against the wall. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.